5 early signs of cognitive decline that feel like minor forgetfulness. If you've ever walked into a room and forgotten why you were there, if a familiar name suddenly sits just out of reach, or if you've caught yourself saying, "That never used to happen to me," then this video is for you. Today, we're talking about 5 early signs of cognitive decline that feel like nothing more than minor forgetfulness, the kind most people brush off, joke about, or blame on age. And here's the important part. By the end of this video, you'll know how to tell the difference between what's truly normal aging and what deserves your attention right now. Some of what you'll hear may sound familiar. You might already know it. It might even seem basic, but the results are out of this world when people finally recognize these signs early and take the right steps. This isn't about fear, it's about clarity, control, and protecting the sharp, capable mind that has carried you through decades of life. I'm going to guide you gently through each sign, using real-life moments you'll recognize instantly. No medical jargon, no lectures. And at the very end of this video, I'll share one critical insight that often surprises people, even those who've researched memory and brain health for years. It's one reason many older adults wish they had watched a video like this sooner. So take a breath, get comfortable, and stay with me, because the first sign is subtle, easy to miss, and almost everyone ignores it. Sign 1. Forgetting the details, not the story. The first early sign often hides in plain sight because it feels so harmless. You remember the story, but the details keep slipping away. You know you had lunch with a friend last week. You remember enjoying it, but you can't recall where you went, what you ordered, or what you talked about. At first, this feels normal. Life is busy, there's a lot to remember. But here's the subtle shift many people miss. This isn't about forgetting once in a while, it's about noticing that the details disappear faster than they used to, even when the moment mattered to you. Many older adults tell me, "I remember the big picture just fine." And that's true. Early cognitive changes often spare long-term memory at first. What changes is the brain's ability to encode new information clearly. The moment goes in fuzzy, so it comes back out fuzzy. That's why retracing your steps doesn't always help anymore. It's not lost, it was never fully stored. This can show up as rereading the same page in a book, or watching a show and realizing you've missed key parts, even though you were looking right at the screen. Again, this doesn't mean something terrible is happening, but it does mean your brain may be asking for more support than it used to. The key here is awareness, not alarm. When you start noticing patterns instead of isolated moments, that's when paying attention truly matters. Why this first sign is often dismissed. What makes this first sign so tricky is how easy it is to explain away. We tell ourselves we're tired. We blame stress, distractions, or having too much on our plate. And for many years, that explanation works just fine. But as we get older, the brain doesn't bounce back from overload the way it once did. What used to be a temporary fog can slowly become the new normal. There's also something deeper happening emotionally. Many older adults over 60 have spent their lives being capable, dependable, and sharp. Admitting that memory feels different now can feel uncomfortable, even threatening. So instead, we laugh it off. We say, "That's just old age," and move on. The problem is, early cognitive changes thrive on being ignored. This isn't about losing intelligence. In fact, most people experiencing these early signs are still very intelligent, thoughtful, and articulate. What's changing is the brain's efficiency. Think of it like a favorite car that still runs beautifully, but doesn't accelerate the way it used to unless you give it the right fuel and care. When people recognize this early, they often feel relief. Finally, there's a name for what they've been experiencing. Finally, they realize they're not lazy, careless, or losing it. They're simply noticing a signal. And signals are meant to be listened to, not feared. Sign 2. Word-finding pauses that feel embarrassing. The second early sign shows up in conversation, and it can be surprisingly emotional. You know exactly what you want to say, but the word just won't come. It's right there, on the tip of your tongue. You might gesture, describe it, or substitute another word hoping no one notices. Eventually, it may pop up hours later, or not at all. Occasional word-finding trouble is normal at any age, but when it starts happening more often, especially with common words or familiar names, it deserves attention. This isn't about forgetting rare vocabulary, it's about struggling to retrieve everyday language you've used your entire life. Many older adults say this is the moment they feel most self-conscious. Conversations used to flow easily. Now there are pauses, hesitations, a quiet frustration that's hard to explain. You might even find yourself speaking less in groups, not because you don't have something to say, but because it takes more effort to say it. What's happening here is not a loss of knowledge. The words are still stored in your brain. The challenge is the pathway to reach them quickly. Think of it like a filing cabinet where the files are intact, but the labels are fading. Noticing this early gives you power. Language is one of the brain's most trainable abilities, especially when you understand what's changing and why.
The emotional impact of this sign. This second sign often affects confidence more than memory itself. People begin to doubt themselves. They replay conversations in their minds and think, "I used to be so quick." That inner dialogue can quietly shrink your world if you let it. You might avoid phone calls, social events, or speaking up in meetings or family discussions. Here's something rarely talked about. Emotional stress makes word finding harder. The more pressure you feel to get it right, the more the brain freezes. This creates a loop. Difficulty leads to stress, stress leads to more difficulty. And because this happens silently, many people assume they're alone in it. But you're not. This is one of the most common early cognitive changes, and it often responds beautifully to the right kind of mental and emotional support. The brain thrives when it feels safe, unhurried, and engaged, not rushed or judged. If this sounds familiar, pause for a moment and remind yourself this is not a personal failure. It's a signal, and signals can guide you toward positive change when you listen early enough. Sign 3. Losing track of time in familiar routines. The third sign feels almost invisible at first. You're doing things you've done 1,000 times, getting dressed, preparing a meal, running errands, but they take longer than they used to. You may find yourself stopping mid-task, wondering what comes next, even though nothing is truly wrong. This isn't about forgetting how to do things, it's about the sequence feeling less automatic. The brain usually runs familiar routines on autopilot. Early cognitive changes can make that autopilot a little less reliable, so tasks require more conscious effort. You might notice this when cooking a simple recipe and checking it repeatedly, or when driving a familiar route and suddenly feeling unsure for a moment. These brief pauses can be unsettling, but they're often brushed off quickly. Here's a gentle pause for you.
If you're still watching and this feels familiar, type 1 in the comments below. Not for anyone else, just for yourself. It's a small moment of acknowledgement, and it matters more than you might think. Recognizing this sign early can help you rebuild mental flow and confidence before frustration sets in. And yes, that's absolutely possible. Why familiar tasks matter so much. Familiar routines are the brain's comfort zone. When changes show up here, they're often one of the clearest early signals that something subtle is shifting. But here's the good news. This is also where the brain is most adaptable. When routines become less automatic, many people respond by doing less. They simplify, avoid, or rush through tasks. Unfortunately, that can weaken the very neural pathways that need support. The brain follows use. What you gently challenge, it strengthens. This is why paying attention, not panicking, is so important. Small adjustments can restore a sense of ease and control. Slowing down intentionally, engaging your senses, and staying mentally present during routines can make a remarkable difference. Many older adults are surprised to learn that cognitive health isn't just about puzzles or memory games. It's about how you move through daily life, how you focus, how you breathe, how you allow your brain to stay curious instead of rushed. This sign isn't a warning to stop. It's an invitation to reconnect with your own rhythm. Sign 4. Increased irritability or mental fatigue. This next sign often surprises people because it doesn't feel like memory at all. It feels emotional. You may notice that you get irritated more easily, especially in busy or noisy environments. Conversations feel draining. Decisions feel heavier. By the end of the day, your mind feels used up. What's happening is cognitive fatigue. When the brain has to work harder to process information, it tires more quickly. This can show up as impatience, withdrawal, or a strong desire to be alone. Many people assume this is just personality or aging, but it's often the brain asking for recovery and support. This sign is important because it affects relationships. Loved ones may not understand why you seem different. You may not understand it yourself, but recognizing the connection between mental effort and emotional response can be incredibly freeing. This isn't about becoming less kind or less capable. It's about energy, and energy can be restored when you know how to protect it. The quiet role of overstimulation. Modern life is loud, fast, and constant. For an aging brain, that stimulation can become overwhelming without us realizing it. Background noise, multitasking, and non-stop input drain cognitive reserves quickly. When those reserves run low, memory, language, and patience all suffer. That's why moments of quiet are not a luxury, they're essential maintenance. The brain repairs itself in calm. Many people notice that when they give themselves permission to slow down, their clarity returns. Words come more easily. Tasks feel simpler. Mood improves. These changes can happen faster than expected when the brain feels supported. Understanding this sign helps you work with your brain instead of against it, and that cooperation is where real improvement begins. Repeating questions or stories.
The fifth early sign is one many people notice through others. A loved one gently says, "You already told me that," or "We talked about this yesterday." Repeating questions or stories doesn't mean you're not listening or don't care. It often means the information didn't fully stick the first time. This can feel embarrassing, even painful, but it's also one of the most important signs to recognize early. Repetition tells us something about how new information is being stored, not about intelligence or worth. When this happens occasionally, it's normal. When it becomes frequent, it's a signal worth respecting. And here's the hopeful part. This is also one of the areas where early action can make a meaningful difference. We're building towards something important together, and coming up later, I'll share a perspective most people overlook, one that can completely change how you approach brain health from this point forward.
The common thread behind all 5 signs. At this point, you may be noticing a pattern. These 5 signs don't arrive loudly. They don't announce themselves as cognitive decline. They arrive quietly, disguised as normal aging, stress, or personality changes. And that's exactly why so many people miss the opportunity to act early. The common thread behind all 5 signs is processing efficiency. The brain still knows, it still understands, but it takes a little longer, a little more energy, and a little more intention. When we don't recognize that shift, we keep demanding the same performance without offering the same support. Here's something empowering. Early cognitive changes are not a dead end. They're a crossroads. One path leads to frustration, withdrawal, and shrinking confidence. The other leads to awareness, adaptation, and often surprising improvement. Most people were never taught how the aging brain actually works, so when something changes, they assume decline is inevitable. It isn't. The brain remains plastic, meaning it can change well into our 70s, 80s, and beyond. The key is timing. Early recognition gives you options. Late recognition limits them. And you're here now, which already puts you ahead of the curve. Why basic knowledge creates extraordinary results. This is where that earlier idea comes back. You might already know it. It might even seem basic, but the results are out of this world. Simple things, sleep quality, daily movement, mental focus, emotional safety have an outsized impact on brain health. Yet they're often overlooked because they don't sound impressive. No fancy tools, no complicated routines. But the brain doesn't respond to complexity, it responds to consistency. People who improve most aren't the ones who chase every new trend. They're the ones who return to fundamentals and apply them with intention. They reduce overload. They protect attention. They give their brain what it needs to do its job well. When these basics are aligned, many people notice clearer thinking, fewer word-finding pauses, better mood, and stronger memory, sometimes within weeks. That's not magic. That's biology working as designed. The power of noticing without judging. One of the most important skills you can develop is noticing changes without criticizing yourself. Stress creates stress. Stress impairs memory. It's a vicious cycle. Instead of saying, "What's wrong with me?"
Try saying, "That's interesting." Curiosity keeps the brain flexible. Fear locks it up. When you approach your mind with patience, you create the conditions for improvement. This is especially important for older adults who often carry decades of high expectations for themselves. You are allowed to adjust. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to support your brain differently than you did at 40 or 50. This mindset shift alone can change how your brain performs day to day. Let's pause here for a moment. If you're still watching, still listening, and something in this video has resonated with you, even quietly, type 1 in the comments below. You don't need to explain. This isn't about algorithms. It's about acknowledging that you're paying attention to your mind, and that matters. Sometimes that small act of recognition is the first step toward real change. Now, let's continue, because what comes next is where understanding turns into action. Why many people wait too long. Most people don't act until something feels serious. By then, frustration has built up, confidence has eroded, habits have hardened. But early action doesn't require drastic change. It requires alignment. Tiny shifts, done consistently, protect cognitive function far more effectively than big efforts done rarely. Waiting feels safer, but it quietly costs you time. And time is the one thing the brain can't replace. You don't need a diagnosis to care for your mind. You need awareness, and you already have that. The role of purpose and engagement. One factor that rarely gets enough attention is purpose. The brain thrives when it feels needed. When days feel meaningful, the mind stays engaged. This doesn't mean staying busy for the sake of it. It means having something, anything that invites curiosity, contribution, or connection. People who maintain cognitive strength often share one thing in common. They stay mentally involved in life. They ask questions, they teach, they learn, they care. Purpose isn't grand, it's personal, and it's powerful. The most overlooked lever of brain health. Here's something most people don't realize until much later. The brain improves fastest when stress is lowered first. Not challenged first, not trained first, calmed first. When the nervous system feels safe, the brain can learn, remember, and adapt. Without that safety, even the best strategies fall flat. This is where many people struggle, not because they lack effort, but because they skip this step entirely. And that leads us to the most effective method I want to share with you, the optimal method. The most effective approach combines 3 elements in this order: calm, clarity, and challenge. First, calm the system through quiet moments, steady breathing, reduced multitasking, and emotional reassurance. Second, create clarity, one task at a time, one conversation at a time, one focus at a time. Only then gently challenge the brain with learning, conversation, and novelty. This order matters. When done correctly, it unlocks progress many people thought was no longer possible. It sounds simple. It is simple. And the results truly are out of this world. Here's the most important takeaway. Early signs are not warnings of the end. They're invitations to begin supporting your brain differently.
You don't need to do everything. You just need to do the right things in the right order. If this video helped you see your mind with more clarity and less fear, type 2 in the comments below. It tells me, and more importantly, tells you that you're choosing awareness over avoidance. And if you want more guidance like this, clear, respectful, and designed for real life, subscribe, like, and share this video with someone you care about. Brain health is not just personal, it's something we protect together. Thank you for staying with me until the end.